Welcome to Icons of the Dragon Ball community, where I speak to people who I feel are of importance to the Dragon Ball community and who have somehow contributed in a positive way. Joining me on this edition, a man who really needs no introduction, somebody whom I consider one of the founding fathers of Dragon Ball fandom in North America, and one of the ones that is still left. He's like Yoda, like the Jedi have all been wiped out. He's still around. Please welcome, formerly of VegettoEX's homepage, then it became Kanzenshuu. No, then it became Daizenshuu EX, then Kanzenshuu. I think it was VegettoEX's links before that. But you know who he is. Mike, a.k.a. VegettoEX. How are you, sir?
I am great. I appreciate that you know my background that well. That's so cool.
You'd be surprised as to how many people know everything about you guys. But you talk about it, so.
That's a creepy thing about the internet. Yes, people remember what I say more than I do.
Yeah, right. No, same thing with me. So I wanted to, you've often tweeted about 16-year-old Mike, and I kind of wanted to really talk to you. It's funny. This whole thing kind of came from a buddy of mine who I was talking to him about the Dragon Ball fandom, and he was saying, I was telling him about how things were before Toonami or during the early Toonami era, and how there was this whole crop of fans online that were very, they hated the censorship of the original Ocean dub, the early websites like your website, of course, Planet Namek, DBZ Uncut, and there was this whole fandom of fans that just were such I guess you can call them just obsessively hardcore over this show and this manga, which at that point was very, very young. And he told me, he's like, I've heard of that. I've heard. And it's weird to me that there's people who are so young that weren't even around back then. It's like lore to them, I don't know, like the Jedi. I keep saying like the old Republic. That's what it comes off like.
Yeah, it's it always freaks me out when people say they've been coming to my site. I got a comment the other day where they said something like, your website was a major part of my childhood. That is extremely frightening to me.
Yes, it makes you feel old.
Yeah, it sure does.
Right. So I wanted to talk about kind of that era because, man, these kids nowadays and just kind of...
these damn kids, I know, right?
Kids, bro. Dude, they sit there. They can go on Hulu. They can go on Funimation. They can watch the entire series start to finish in maybe a couple weeks if they really are hardcore. They can, buy the games at the stores. They can... All these things they can do... That's not how it was for us. We didn't have that luxury.
Right. I mean, that's anime fandom as a whole, but it's especially that with these long-running shonen shows like Dragon Ball. One Piece had a little bit of that. One Piece started, 98 in the manga, 99, something like that, so it had a little bit of that. But the previous old shows, Fist of the North Star, Saint Seiya, unless you're in Latin America where you just get everything constantly.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't have an opportunity. You could not start at the beginning and end at the end. It was impossible for anyone to really do that unless you had some kind of personal connection to Japan and you could read Japanese to get each individual volume of the manga, the collector release. You just couldn't do that. You were doing it piecemeal through Fansubs when the syndicated TV broadcast started, early scanlations online. So you would have to be jumping around from Cell Arc to maybe some raw GT stuff, back to, I saw a scan of some Frieza material. And then you never saw early Dragon Ball stuff until NGN subs came out. I mean, you were all over the place.
Yeah, no, and that's the funny thing is I've talked about this myself with other people. It's just, they asked me, did you watch, Dragon Ball on Toonami? And I said, well, I did, but I only watched it to fill in the holes of my Fansubs. Because I had the Cell arc. I had Gohan versus Cell, the entire fight. I had Frieza versus Trunks. I had several different tapes from different parts of the series, but there was those in-between episodes that I kind of had to watch, that was back then, that's all we had. I want to take you back even further, though, because you were on Kerberfer's show, shout-outs to Kerberfer, and you were talking about how you first got into the fandom, and it was very creepy to me because it was very similar to
Similar story? Yeah.
Extremely. And I'm going to hit you with 3 words right now.
Okay.
Electronic Gaming Monthly.
It's accurate. I think you're giving me a little too much credit, though. I mean, what you're referring to is, you're video game kids, so we're reading every magazine, EGM, EGM2 when that came around.
EGM2.
Game Pro, Tips and Tricks, I mean, all that stuff that was out there. So yeah, I mean, I was a huge EGM reader, subscriber, lover, enthusiast. In the back of every issue of EGM was all the import stuff. And that's in addition to import coverage that they were doing in the magazine, which, as we've learned in later years, they pretty much blatantly stole from Famitsu, but whatever.
Right.
But the back of the magazine, they would have the advertisements for all these import shops, and you would be able to get, like N64 games imported from Japan ahead of time, and you would always see these colorful splashes, all these characters lined up, and it would be the same character 3 times in a row, maybe 4 times in a row, maybe 8 times in a row, because you didn't know that Yamcha and Goku were different characters, and suddenly another one had gold hair. And so that was my first exposure to it. But where I say you're giving me too much credit is I didn't know and I didn't care. I was just aware of it. My introduction to the series, believe it or not, was Funimation's English dub. 1996, I skipped 2 DBZ. I didn't catch the first Dragon Ball TV series. My wife's got a year on me. She's more hardcore than I am by a year. So
yes,
props
indeed.
to her on that. But yeah, it was my story that I've been telling myself since 96. I have no idea how accurate it is anymore. I had a friend who was super into American comics, and one weekend he called me later in the day. He's like, yo, I just saw this awesome cartoon earlier today. You got to check it out next week. And I guess what I saw was episode 2 of the original syndicated broadcast of Dragon Ball Z, dubbed in English from Funimation, September 1996. And here I am in 2015, and it's been a huge part of my life since then.
19 years. And now that was the I Smell Death in the Air, right? That was that
It
one?
was, yep, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah. And it's funny because, I wanted to ask you about EGM, talk a little bit more, just a little bit about it.
Sure.
I remember there was a arcade game, very obscure, called Dragon Ball Z 2.
Yep.
And EGM did not a cover story, but did a big splash page about it. And it told,
sure did.
Yeah, it told the story. And that was my first introduction. I'm reading this story, such and such Piccolo's son, Goku, Gohan, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting, And then like you in the back, you'd had all these characters with the blonde hair. And then I saw an advertisement for a game called Dragon Ball Z Super Futoden with an F, right?
Yep.
And I still have the magazine. That's the crazy thing. It was actually the April 94. This is how wacky my memory is. April 94 EGM with Beavis and Butthead on the cover. That's
I was going to say, I know that issue. I have that issue, of course.
You and I are the only people on earth who have that issue, probably, right? So I remember that, and I remember just like looking at like the screenshots, and I'm like, dude, what is that move? It looks like a Hadouken, because I was a Street Fighter guy.
Yeah, sure, me too.
Dude, and it's funny because nowadays, I don't know what's happened to the world. It's like back then when you went to the arcade, like, especially in that year, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. There was no Tekken. There was Virtual Fighter, maybe.
Right.
But that Hadouken looks so familiar. And then, of course, when Dragon Ball, like you're talking about, aired, Sunday morning, for me, it was Sunday morning at 6 a.m., I'm seeing Goku and his hair just goes gold, and I'm like, man, that reminds me of Sonic.
Exactly, yeah.
And it all comes together.
Yeah, and you go back to those magazines, I think we didn't know it at the time, but was grabbing us was this completely different character design style, but it wasn't completely different because we were into video games. Like you mentioned, Street Fighter, we saw the similarities on just a basic level, not knowing it, but like, this is Japanese stuff. This stuff has, at some root, a consistent design, a consistent aesthetic, and it was dragging us in, and Dragon Ball was at the forefront there. It was so huge.
And it was like the first show I can remember. I mean, X-Men kind of did it, Batman kind of did it, where it was a continuing serialized story. It wasn't just episodic. Right. Yeah. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, and this is kind of an interesting question because I think you might know where I'm going with this. Was Dragon Ball, was those magazines and the Funimation dub in 95, was that your first look at Toriyama?
I think it was. One of my biggest shames is that I didn't play Chrono Trigger until the DS release. I always have that shadow hanging over me. I feel so bad about that. But if I think back to everything that he had done, I never actually played Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior on the NES.
I did, and that's
skip on me. Did you?
That's what I was going to bring up, but I had no idea that it was the same thing.
Well, especially because so much of the cover art got changed over here. I mean, you compare some of the cover art between Japan and America. Dragon Quest III has such an amazing cover. I mean, it's basically Gohan on the cover there. But we didn't get that kind of stuff. We got the, fiery dragons and kind of American D&D style pastel-y artwork. We didn't get Smiling Slime on the cover for our stuff here.
Nah, but it's just funny because it's so weird how, and this goes for I think both you and I, how Toriyama's kind of always been there.
Yeah.
Like a surrogate father in a creepy kind of way.
right, I hear you.
And it's like, I remember my first, and I think it was a subconscious connection, is when I saw that Dragon Ball episode with Oolong and he becomes the knight, and I said, man, that looks like the knight from Dragon Warrior.
No, yeah.
And then you don't even realize it until you grow up and you're like, geez, it's the same guy.
And then you go back and you really look at everything he's done over the years and how many times he's just ripped himself off wholesale. Something we've been talking a lot about recently on our site is everything he just used from Dr. Slump as is. I mean, we're talking about a series of numbered androids. We're talking about a final villain who is a Majin. We're talking about tournaments. I mean, Dr. Slump, it's not a proto-Dragon Ball in any sense, but he just stole stuff. And he did the same thing with designs. He took exact designs from Dr. Slump. The best example being God in Dr. Slump is just him with glasses. Yep. It's the same, and he acknowledges it. But yeah, all of his prototypes leading up to it, it's because it's Toriyama, and yeah, he's got this great flair for designing, great creativity, but he always comes back to the same basics.
Yeah, and the thing is that when I look at Beerus and Whis, the two latest characters, well, technically it would be Champa and whoever the mysterious,
right.
It's Toriyama, but it's like different. And how do you feel?
They do feel different, right? Yeah.
How do you feel about Toriyama's kind of modern art style? Because a lot of fans have been complaining about how people are too thin now. Gohan is like very skinny, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know. He's always kind of changed his style a little bit. I mean, in the anime, you had Maeda who did the early Dragon Ball stuff, and then of course Yamamuro.
Early round stuff, right?
And then Yamamuro did but now it's like, I don't even know. Like, is it just him just kind of evolving? I don't know. What do you think?
I think those kinds of complaints, and I hate to pigeonhole people, I think they're coming from people who came into it during Toonami, so they may have missed or came later to the science stuff and the Frieza stuff. So maybe they came in around Frieza to the end. He was already angular at that point, particularly with the golden hair. So they completely missed the very gradual 11-year transition of super round to super short and angular. And so they're seeing this transition that has, again, transpired over the last 10 years. And maybe they just don't have the perspective to go back and see the 30-year history of the evolution of the art style.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've talked to fans about this that kind of got into it with Toonami, and I was very surprised as to how many of them have not seen Dragon Ball, or they see, and I'm talking about Dragon Ball the anime, not Z, and they see Dragon Ball as this like prequel, and it's like, no, you don't understand. This is not a prequel. This is the first half of the story.
Right.
It's such a I guess because it came out backwards. I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, I wish I could live in a world where I saw the first series first, the early part of the story first, and it just didn't happen. I'm thankful that I had the chance to go back and do it, but I think you do not have a full understanding of those characters. You may think you do, you really don't, unless you read that early stuff. The teachings we have from this old turtle sage, he's not just a slapstick side character. He has some really important morals that he instills in these people that kind of come to him, and he ends up surrounded by these people that had no interest in him. That moment in the 22nd tournament,
I was going to say that. I can't believe it.
Tenshinhan just really turns around, and I think it's so solidified in the TV adaptation. Kohei Miyauchi, I think, is that character, and the way that he responds to Tenshinhan and the tone of his voice, the warmth in his voice. It's there in the text, but it's really there in the vocal performance. And you can hear me feeling like, oh, I just feel that so well. And I'm so sad because Miyauchi isn't with us anymore. But yeah, you do not know these characters unless you've been there since the beginning. And I don't mean you have to have been there. I mean, you need to go back and experience it.
No, it's crazy because I was literally going to bring up Tenshinhan and you did it first. That's creepy, man. But it's awesome, though. I can definitely tell, that you and I are like brothers from a different mother in a way. People don't. I've been telling people this and they don't get it because I literally will hear your podcast and I'm like, he's going to say this, and you say it, and I'm like, Jesus. No, and not just that, but also at the end of the tournament, Tenshinhan has his face turn, his good turn, and then you see that scene. People miss these great moments. That scene where the entire crowd, lifts them both up is such a great scene. I'll tell you one thing. I'll share this with you. Me and my fiance are watching the series start to finish, Dragon Ball through Z.
Oh, that's great.
In Japanese. Her first time, because apparently she had no childhood. But and it's crazy because she actually is enjoying Dragon. She has enjoyed Dragon. And we're in the middle of the Cell arc. We're right when Cell absorbs 17. So, but she's telling me, she's like, oh, she is missing Dragon Ball, and it's so backwards for most of the fandom because I played a little bit of the dub, and she thinks that Shemmel sounds weird, and everybody says the opposite.
Right. I mean, your first love is your first love. That's how it is for most people. Not always. I mean, my first exposure to the cast was not the Japanese cast. I think a lot of people do shift over the years. But, I mean, your first love is what it is. And if that's your indoctrination into it, it can be really hard to let go of that.
It is, but at the same time, look, I respect Linda Young, but Chris Ayres is like a god among men when it comes to voice acting. You know what I mean? Especially with the new movie.
It's such a great collective effort. I mean, you have the scriptwriter, you have the voice actor, you have the director. It really takes a lot of people, but yes, that performance is something. I've said this, I've taken flack for it, maybe I've not taken flack for it. If you're exclusively a fan of Funimation's English dub, I hold nothing against you if you are, you have never heard Frieza until Ayres took over that role. There has never been, except maybe one line in the dub of Final Bout in 1997. Maybe that was Frieza.
And that wasn't Linda Young.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
There has never been accurate Frieza in English, and it's so liberating to finally hear that.
Well, as much as I love Chris Ayres, I mean, the only thing that he really lacks, and this is no disrespect to him, is that he doesn't have Ryusei Nakao's evil laugh, which I think is the best part of that character.
Exactly. I mean, that's also partly a cultural thing, that kind of laugh, that Japanese, Chinese nobility to it. We don't have that perfect equivalent over here. So that's really tough to adapt. In lieu of that, everything else is spot on.
Well, in your opinion, I wanted to ask you about the fan subs in just a moment, but I wanted to ask you this question. In your opinion, how important, if you consider yourself, if you're listening to this right now and you consider yourself a, quote, hardcore fan of Dragon Ball, you've got the orange bricks most likely because Dragon boxes are very hard to find. You have most people listening, you've watched the series on television at home. In your opinion, how important is it to watch Dragon Ball start to finish in Japanese if you consider yourself a hardcore fan?
I think there's two answers to that question. One is it's essential. I'll get back to that. Before that, though, you have to read the manga. That is the story from the pen of the creator himself. I think you don't know Toriyama and you don't know Dragon Ball until you read it as from the author himself. Now, the TV series, obviously an adaptation of that. So, I mean, you can be a fan of so many different types of things. I think if you're going to be a fan of something, you can be any kind of fan you want, but if you're going to describe yourself as, yes, I am hardcore, yes, I claim to know everything, I want to know everything, why wouldn't you seek out
That's what I'm saying.
as much knowledge as possible? Why wouldn't you seek out the original version? I come from a time when that was not available to me, and maybe that's what we have in us. We have this drive, we have this spark where it's, you won't give it to me, damn it, I'm going to get it. Come hell I'm going to get it from somewhere, somehow.
And just to say one thing, we're not in any way, and I know you're not, encouraging bootlegging here. That's not what we're doing.
No, that's not the thing, because we don't live in an era where that's necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, it's freely available in so many sources. You mentioned Hulu earlier. I mean, go to your local library. They probably have it. I mean, if you're down and out, you can still check out Dragon Ball in some kind of form somehow. But yeah, it's It is just that lack of spark that makes me curious sometimes. And I think a lot of people just see it as kind of a personal offense where it's, but I thought I was a huge fan. And
Yes,
I would never
yes.
tell someone you're not a true fan. I think that's absolute BS. You can be a fan on so many different levels. I've talked about it. I consider myself a huge 100% fan of Futurama. Watch at least one episode, if not two, if not three episodes every day.
Wow.
Never read a book on it. Never been to a panel about it. Never watched a behind the scenes video about it. Like, I am probably the definition of the most hardcore casual Futurama fan. So you can be that way with Dragon Ball. I'm not going to get into an argument over the deeper meaning of something with someone who does have that background, though. And that, see, you've already drugged me into like the forum debates, the YouTube comment debates kind of thing.
It'll never
that's
end.
That's not where I want to go with it. It really is that if you want to really know everything about something, why would you not go to the primary source?
No, absolutely. And it's funny because earlier you said the word cyan, and I'm sure there's fans with tears in their eyes right now that they cannot accept the fact that Texas
let me
was
taste your
wrong.
salty tears. Give it to me.
Yes.
It's delightful.
They cannot taste. Oh, I'm sorry. They cannot handle the fact that Texas was wrong. They can't handle it. They can't handle it. Sci-Bi Man, what is that? Dude, I had a guy once tell me, he goes, it's not Goku, it's Goku. It's like, I'm glad you're teaching me Japanese, Mr. Ginyu Assault. You know what I mean? Like, damn it.
Yeah, I know.
Get off my ass. I'm sorry.
I know. I think you're just now getting into that territory, and let me tell you,
you've been in it for.
I've been in it for a while. You will move past it. You will begin to ignore those comments, and they will slide off, and they will stop after a period of time. I think that's another thing. And you've introduced me as an icon of the community, and that's
Founding father.
Weird to me. No, I'm second generation. I'm not founding father. But it's definitely the kind of thing where if I'm going to read something from someone, if I'm going to listen specifically to someone talk about something, we'll take Dragon Ball as an example. If they're using reversion, to use Funimation's own phrase there, reversioned terminology, I kind of see that as, well, are they... I don't know how to say it. Are they a good enough source? Should I believe them?
I see. No, yeah, and so are you telling me that you have that thing? Because I definitely have this where when you're talking to a fan, you can tell within the first 5-10 minutes what kind of a fan they are. Because I kind of have that radar now. Like if they start throwing "Can Broly beat Beerus" at me, I kind of know like where they stand. You know what I mean? I don't want to come off like a purist, but that's kind of...
I guess, but you do come off as a purist, and you come off as an ass saying that. And that's the hard thing about trying to even have this conversation, because it's so difficult, because it's like, yes, I am judging you. It's not necessarily in a mean, terrible, I'm going to kick you away from me kind of way.
Yes.
But we've all had such different experiences with the show, and... I'm sorry, guys. I've been around long enough. I have seen every type of fan. I've been through those different types of things myself. I have so many different views on the series now, and particularly how I would translate things in the series now that I did not hold even just 2 years ago. And I'm probably going to change my opinions on those things in maybe another 2 or 3 years. It's just as I learn more and more, this is what you hope from people. As they become kind of more knowledgeable fans, you learn more and more. You got to take a step back and think critically about what you're looking at. I think one of the best examples of that is, what is the name of the blue-haired girl that shows up in the very first chapter? It's really tough because we've been so indoctrinated from a spelling that exists in the manga from Toriyama. But is there a better way to adapt that name? And that is the number one point of resistance I see these days from people trying to take that step back and say, wait a minute. What would I do here?
And it's funny that you could say Bulma, Buruma, Bloomers, or like our buddy Lance would say Bluma. Right. But it's funny, I don't know if you noticed, but I went to go see Resurrection F with Lance.
Oh, did you? Oh, nice.
Yes. And it was funny because when he had purposely avoided all spoilers, everything.
I know he did. I saw. Yeah.
And he comes out of the theater, and the first thing he says is, he goes, "That's it?" And I'm like, that's the same reaction I had. I enjoyed the movie. It was fun, but I think we all kind of expected, like, you know, a little bit more so. I think what I expected, I don't know about you, but I expected Frieza to actually have a little bit more heat on, you know, the good guys. But it seems like even if Frieza had defeated Goku and Vegeta, he would have had to deal with Beerus and Whis either way. I mean, I know that they weren't going to get involved, but had he threatened Beerus and Whis' food, it would have been, you know, time's up for him. So it almost felt like it didn't have that much, like, drama. He kind of conveyed that to me. But he's a smart guy, as you know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say one thing that I did, I can't speak for anybody else, is that one night I was at this chick's house and I was on my tablet and I went to Kanzenshuu, and I encourage everybody to do this. If you want to kind of really understand Dragon Ball on a deeper level, go to Kanzenshuu, go to the translations and read all the Toriyama interviews. I literally just sat there and just read them all. And that's how you learn so much. Like, you know, if you didn't read those translations, you wouldn't know that Mr. Satan came from, that's not his actual name. It's a title he won from a tournament in a tower or something like that.
Right. I mean, a lot of that is in the manga. I think you're talking about two separate things here. You're talking about new information introduced kind of in universe. Yeah. But then there's all the external stuff about how he came up with the ideas, the people he worked with, what his influences were. And yeah, I mean, one of our goals is to document as much of this stuff as possible, because in addition to simply reading the series or watching the series, that's the stuff that's going to give you that grand appreciation of where it came from. I mean, I speak disparagingly about strength debates, and I don't 100% really mean it. It's kind of a shtick. But I do mean that that's not going to give you a deeper appreciation of where it came from. What is when you read Toriyama's creepy, perverted comments on a week-to-week basis. As dumb as that is, it does somehow give you this, like, look into the mind of a really weird author in Japan that somehow came up with this amazing series.
Made a lot of money.
That's right.
Now, let me ask you that about what you just said. Why do you think that certain people, and this is not a disparaging comment, but I'm just curious, why do you think that certain fans do kind of over obsess over? There's two things, and I think you know what one of them is: power and canon. It's like these things are not that important when you learn to understand Toriyama. You come to kind of understand that it's not that important.
Well, the power thing is obvious. It's a series about monkeys punching each other in the face. I mean, the series is about power, getting more power.
Yeah. But they always want to know, like, who would win between, you know, the Goku Superman thing, the Thanos and Frieza, like, and it's like that's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I get that, but still, that's not really the part. I don't know. I think it's. A lot of it is when they came into the series, and that goes back to the Toonami thing. That was the exact period of the show when those powers and those readings were at their max. And so you kind of watching these repeats of these that part where all the numbers were flying at you, and so you're led to believe it's more important than it really is. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, but there's a reason why it was dropped later on.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a holistic view of the series. And if you're the general American fan, you didn't get that. You got mostly Frieza to the end of the Buu arc. You didn't get that starting with Dragon Ball when the power was more the spiritual thing and this inner drive than it was from the number part.
The Scouters.
Yeah. Then going over to the Canon thing, that's more recent. That's the last few years. And the reason for that is all the ancillary stuff we're getting. Mm-hmm. It was never a question before. I mean, sure, it was a question. It was, is GT in the same continuity? Is that canonical? How about the movies? But it was pretty easy to answer then. And even if everything had an asterisk at it, it was a pretty easy answer. GT, well, it wasn't actually written by the original author, but it takes place after. That's easy enough.
Yeah.
The movies, well, they all take place. They can't take place except for, like movie 9 and movie 13, a little bit like that kind of stuff. But it was very easy to describe those things. We live in a world now where Bardock has 4 separate storylines. I mean, so I understand the question. If you're approaching it from this perspective where you're just learning, wait, I didn't know that Bardock had these 4 or 5 different stories. Which one is real? Because you want to know which one should I pay more attention to? I think there's always an underlying question that people don't necessarily know how to ask. So the question comes out as, well, which one is canon? Yeah. I think it's, the way I always describe it is, am I supposed to accept this as always having been true, despite the fact that it is only just now 20 years later being written into the story? And that's a tough one. But then when you have contradicting stories about the same character, it's more difficult. Like, the question is so difficult to ask, and it's even more difficult to answer. I think it's just this need to know. Like we were talking about earlier, that spark, I need to know. Well, I got to know which one is real, because I want to pay attention to the true version.
Yeah, and it's tough now because we have the Battle of Gods film, we have the Battle of Gods story arc in the Toyotaro manga, and we have the Battle of Gods, and there's contradictions in all of them. And we don't even have a real timetable as to when the series takes place, so there's debates about that now.
You're talking about Super, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, as we're recording this, episode 9 just aired, something like that. So we're at a point where we know Videl is pregnant with something. But the early promotion said that this only takes place 6 months after the defeat of Boo. Well, we know when Pawn is born because she's in the manga and we see her at the 28th tournament.
She was 4 years old.
Right. This can't work. So you have all these questions of, first, is Super replacing Battle of Gods? If A, then B. If B, then does that replace the end of the manga? Does that mean part of the manga is not canonical to itself?
Oh my God.
I mean, these questions are so ridiculous that I do not fault people for having these debates and having these questions.
It's not their fault. And let me ask you about...
They're not making it easy for us.
Exactly. And I was going to say, how can this be fixed? I mean, is there any fix at this point? Should Toei put out a guidebook that says, or Shueisha, whomever, that says, okay, this is what counts and this doesn't? I mean, how can they even fix this now? I can't come up with anything in my head.
I think they did. I mean, they had it work for a while with the Frieza movie. You know, we got up to age, 7, 7, 9, something like that. But now with Super, it's, damn, I don't know. How do you fudge it now? Because you got Pawn over here, but you got Goten and Trunks seemingly being this age.
Gregory's
and maybe it was good that they were left out of the Frieza movie so they could avoid having even more problems there. But now they're already here, and we see how they are. Is Super just got to... I don't know, man.
I don't know either.
I do not envy that position, and they probably just won't. That's how they'll do it. They just won't.
That's what I've been telling people. You're not going to get an answer. Just deal with it. So,
but that's also Toriyama's writing style. I mean, that is, again, I take it back to that word I used, holistic. If you take a holistic view of the series, there have been so many continuity errors in the manga itself that people either overlook or choose to ignore or just hadn't had a chance to learn about themselves. My favorite one is that the first and second wishes with the Dragon Balls are only made 8 months apart. That cannot happen. So what do we do?
The wishes thing seems to be like changing as the manga went on too.
I know, and that gets even more bizarre when you get to the end of the series. Like, Toriyama figured out that he made a mistake and tried to cover it up, and yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, so that's what I always tell people. It's, the manga, I suppose, would be the original source material, but even that has contradictions. So just don't think too hard. Don't let it ruin your day. That's what I always say, because people really get angry. Yeah. Let's go back. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to wrap it up there. And that's what Toriyama would tell you. And it's what he's said before. He's like, I'm just writing stories for Japanese boys. Please try not to overthink it, because I sure am not overthinking it. I just want to write stories that can be enjoyed. And I think we want to hold him to a higher standard. And that's cool, but that's not the Toriyama we know and love.
Yeah, he at the end of the day, the way I've understood Toriyama is that he pretty much is a comedic writer first and foremost. And even though, like you said, most fans were exposed to the action part of his story, and he does write great action scenes, probably because he was influenced by Jackie Chan and things like that. He's still a comedy guy at the end of the day, so just take it how it is. I wanted to go back to young Mike again, because
I did too. You've taken me on such a tour of like this abbreviated tour of fandom from then to today, and the way you kind of invited me here was I want to talk about these older days, pre-Toonami, and how things got started. So I'm curious, as someone who was kind of there, what do you want to know from my perspective?
I want to know the story. Okay, so you started watching it, syndication, sub on dub. When did you kind of, I guess, figure out that this show had aired in Japan already, and that, or it was airing? If it's 95, 96?
96 is when the syndication of DBZ started.
Yeah, GT
so
would have been,
GT was still on,
Yeah, GT was on. So I was asking you, when did you, I guess, really figure out that you, when did the obsession start, man? That's what I want to know.
It was instantaneous. So I had a friend who introduced it to me. So we were just two peas in a pod, and he had early BBS access. So, we were already online grabbing the most lowest resolution JPEGs from these surfers and printing stuff out. We learned immediately. We learned a lot of wrong stuff immediately, but we learned a lot, and it just was, I know this needs to be a part of my life. I didn't know at that point that it would still be a part of my life half a lifetime later, but it was that instantaneous. I have to know everything. I must consume as much as possible.
So was it one of those things where you would look at a picture of, example, I don't know, Gogeta, and you would try to figure out who that was, that kind of thing?
Exactly. One of my earliest memories was printing out a young picture of Krillin, except I knew the character of Krillin. So I'm like, is this his son? Because they look the same and they both start with a K. So you make up your own stories in your head for how these characters are related to each other. And I had pictures of Trunks who for months I had no idea who this was. He looks damn cool though.
Yeah, Mary knew, right?
Yeah,
clearly.
I didn't know her yet though. So
no, that's true. No, but and I'll get to that here shortly because I do want to add, because Dragon Ball's kind of been responsible for to impacting your life stronger than anybody else, because it kind of led to you getting married. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
That's crazy. So Toriyama's a godfather in a weird way. But no, I wanted to actually ask you about, okay, so you were downloading these pictures, you were trying to put everything together. I believe you spoke about going to flea markets and finding fan subs. Where did that kind of searching for tapes thing come from? Because I was doing the same thing, but I want to know how you did it.
Yeah, the flea market thing was more my wife. She had a local one. Again, I didn't know her at the time. So for me, it was, I was recording the syndication each week, and it was, okay, I have this. How do I get more of this? And so it was that following year in 1997, I moved, met another friend who was super into the series. He was an army brat, so he had ties to Japan, had been in Japan. He's like, oh, you like Dragon Ball? Oh, here are my weekly Shonen Jump issues with the Cell game. Okay, you are friend for life here.
Wow. So you read it in Japanese?
I read in air quotes. Yeah. Exactly.
The pictures.
So yeah, that was my next step into, okay, learning more about, all right, originally a comic. I figured out it was a comic already by that point, but actually getting to see how it was really introduced to the Japanese audience. Again, someone else who had an internet connection. I didn't get mine until Christmas 97. I started my website January 98. It was that instantaneous. So 97, that's when we started meeting up with random people in chat rooms. Kids, don't do that. I guess chat rooms don't really exist anymore. But
it's all Facebook now.
Exactly. And it was, we have this. What can we get for this? And our first trade was for 3 tapes of the syndication dub broadcast, which was a morbid curiosity for someone else who's like, wait, they dubbed this? I got to see this. For 2 tapes of Fansubs of the Frieza arc. And it was DBZ episodes 94. So that's the Genkidama against Frieza up through 106, I think it was. So right at the defeat of Frieza.
Blows up, yeah.
Right. And so we already knew at that point there was a great transformation. We want that. Do you have that? Yeah, I got that. I'll trade you 2 for 3. Done. So that was kind of my first, glorious experience. And at that point, we had already been downloading very early, low resolution,
Real
160
media?
by 120. Yeah, Real Media, MPEG-1 clips and stuff from some of the oldest websites. Son Gohan's page, Raditz's homepage, who had QuickTime clips. So, we had seen some of it, but never on a tape. So it was, early, mid-97 that Fansubs hit me.
And that was what I was talking about earlier with the whole Jedi Knight comparison. You were downloading from these websites. I remember a lot of these, the Black Goku and all these. And I remember, that might have been a little bit later, but I remember these pages. What happened to these guys?
They grew up. You grow up, you move on.
But I'm grown. I haven't moved on.
I know, and this is something that I don't know if you're a fan of Anime World Order, Daryl Surratt. He talks about the anime fan expiration date. He talks about often how most people are only fans of anime for about 2 years and they move on. It's just a hobby to a lot of people, just like any other hobby is to anyone else. You kind of get into something for a while and you move on with your life.
Well, it's funny because I was actually an anime fan for about 2 or 3 years, but I stayed a Dragon Ball fan. There was just something about Dragon Ball that it's like an obsession. Right. It's weird.
Well, I think everyone latches on to something, whether you're a football fan, whether you're a Dragon Ball fan, whether you're a film buff. There's always something in your life that sticks with you for a longer period of time. And for me, dear God, it was Dragon Ball.
So what I wanted to kind of get into also your memories about you received the Frieza tape. What were your reactions? Now I know you have spoken about this before about Nozawa, how some people would say Nozawa, it's Goku, sounds weird in Japanese, but I kind of see it the same way you do, where when I first heard Nozawa, it's just Goku, and she's such a talented vocal artist, or a voice actress, I mean. So it's like, how were your reactions to watching it in Japanese for the first time back then?
It was never a question to me. Like, this is the show. Why would I question what the show is? Obviously, it was made this way for a reason. This is the show. And I fell in love with everything I heard about it, and most specifically was the music.
Yes.
The Kikuchi score. I mean, at that point, we did not yet have the joint Funimation Pioneer releases of the first 3 movies. That wouldn't come until, I think, December 97 when we got Dead Zone on VHS and such.
Which you have in many different incarnations.
Let's not count the number of DBZ Movie 1 releases I have. Yeah, it was seeing those fansubs and seeing the show, quote unquote, the way it was meant to be seen. I mean, it was kind of this glorious revelation, like, oh, this is Dragon Ball Z.
Yes. Dude,
I love this.
The thing is that Kikuchi score, and it's just like the kids who grew up with Falconer. They love Falconer, but the Kikuchi score to me, just for me, like my experience, because I grew up like I love orchestral scores. Like obviously Dragon Quest had it with Koichi Sugiyama, and then Star Wars is my other love, as I've mentioned enough times on this show. That John Williams kind of, with the violins and the trumpets. So when I first watched it in Japanese, same thing with you, it was so epic. Like I had found, let me ask you, did you have like a store in your town that was like I had a Korean video game store, mom and pop shop.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to these places, man? It's like,
I know, right?
And they had the Neo Geo, they had the Famicom.
Right, yeah. And I moved around a lot. It's crazy. I went to 4 high schools in as many years. So I met a Dragon Ball fan in every school. That was awesome.
Yes.
But there was one town I was in, I think it was called the Rubber Chicken. It was like the local comic shop. It was just a comic shop. But they had shelves of manga. I bought weekly issues. I don't know if they came out weekly, but they were the floppies of the Guyver, the manga of that. I saw Bubblegum Crash before Bubblegum Crisis. I don't know how I managed to do that, why I did that. But yeah, that was the shop that had, here's the real stuff. I think it was one of those, I walked in, I'm like, yo, I like Dragon Ball. What else you got?
Yep.
Like, it was this shelf over here, sir. Well, I wasn't sir at that point. I was a kid, but this is the stuff you're looking for.
So what did you find, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I mean, it was that plus the combination of the Japanimation section at Blockbuster. So it was the same stuff that everyone of my age group got into. It was Vampire Hunter D, Demon City Shinjuku, Akira, Ghost in the Shell, everything that was coming out up to that 98 time frame. I just
Ninja
absorbed. Ninja Scroll, of course, from that 96 to 1998 time frame was whatever Blockbuster had, whatever the local shops had. I wasn't lucky enough to have a shop that did Fansubs. It was all legit stuff, but there was enough out at that time. The original Tekken animated movie.
Oh, God, when they ripped the dinosaur's freaking head, that's the best part of the movie.
Invisible dinosaurs, I know, that stupid movie.
Street Fighter 2 was awesome, though. That was an awesome movie.
Yeah. The one thing that I'll partially defend a replacement soundtrack on, though I love the original Japanese to that, and it's blasphemy for VegettoEX to somewhat defend a replacement score, but that movie ends, Bison in the truck, Korn comes on. I don't know, man. Something about that speaks to my 90s child.
Oh, God. It's like Disturbed and Deftones in the
Right, which is well past my point of understanding. It's like, I do not like that. However,
Such a 90s thing.
I can sympathize where those kids are coming from. I saw a thread on Reddit recently. It was like, was Dragon Ball your introduction, that's not a word. It was Dragon Ball your introduction to rock music. And like a spit take of that. Like, excuse me, you've never heard of rock music before Dragon Ball? Oh, wait, you're 15 years younger than me. Okay, maybe.
It's still weird,
It's like, I get it. I don't love it, but I get it.
And those bands are all gone.
I know, right?
And it's funny because that the Korean store, man, it's funny. It's weird to me because you were in a different part of the world than I was. I'm in Florida, and it was almost the same story. I mean, we had the Korean store. They had, Japanese, and then so I'll just tell you real quick. We they had all the official releases, but there was one tape. It had a white like clamshell. It was different than all the Funimation tapes because they had like the old Ocean dub. Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, which actually had great box art. I love the box art.
It did. Through the Pioneer releases, those box arts were amazing.
Beautiful, man. So I grabbed this tape, and it had a picture of Future Trunks on it. It said Dragon Ball Z movies 5 and 6. So I took it home. I put it in the VHS, and it was... I mean, it opens up with... It was both movies on one tape, and it opens up with Bardock in space, speaking Japanese, Karuri no Kakaroto, and I'm watching it, and I'm like... I've never seen this before. And so, like, then Chala Head Chala kicks in, and it was exactly like you. Like, this is how it's supposed to be. It was weird. It was almost like something from above. Like, this is how it's supposed to be.
It's shone down on us. Yeah, it was such a grand sense of discovery. And again,
they don't get it. They don't get it nowadays.
I really hate the way it comes across as disparaging, and I don't mean it that way. But I think there's a very distinct separation of fandom where today's fans, everything is handed to you. It's all readily available. You can simply search it, and whether it's legit or not, it's available to you. We did not have that. So to see something new that most people had not seen before was new to me. That was such like this, like your favorite indie band kind of thing. When you get your first fansub, like, this is mine. I want to share it, but I don't want to share it too much because it's special and it's mine.
I just remember, because this is when the Dragon Ball Z explosion began. It's so like crazy because it was such a big deal, and it's still a big deal. And there's so many different pockets of fans everywhere. I just remember that Cooler, the first two Cooler movies, well, the only two Cooler movies. Trunks on the cover wasn't even in the movies, whatever. Except
right, that was all those fansub tapes back then. Yep.
They had like those scans that were like they were all like widened images, and it was ugly. So I remember. Yep. I took it to school, and I put the tape in, and I remember white kids, Hispanic kids, black kids.
This is what you were just saying. I had the exact same experience. I think that's what's so magical about Dragon Ball is it brings together all types of fans from all walks of life.
It's incredible. It really is.
Yeah. I did the same thing. It was like study hall. I got this tape. I don't know how this made its way to school. We're going to throw this in over in the corner.
And it's crazy, and it's funny because what's funny about that is you really weren't supposed to see. Kids don't understand nowadays because, and I'm not going to...
They have cell phones with them, I know.
And there's the rules. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, which I guess we were in high school around the same time, it wasn't that... and obviously it was before all the high school tragedies. It wasn't that regulated, so you could kind of do things like, for example, we had some of our teachers...
You could leave school.
You could play Dreamcast. There's the old... Nobody remembers that. Well, you do, but
of course I do.
Yeah, good stuff.
Mine's still hooked up. What are you talking about?
I got mine in my drawer here, so ain't that a B? But and then so here's the crazy part, and I'm gonna ask you if this happened to you too. The tape was in there, and then I had a kid come up to me and goes, "Oh, you like Dragon Ball? Well, check this out." And he showed me his tape.
I got this. And that's how I ended up with a copy of End of Evangelion. It was, oh, you're into this? Here, check this shit out.
Right.
Like, I haven't seen the series. I'm watching End of Eva. It's like, what is happening to my life now?
And it's funny because, that's End of Eva will ruin anybody's life. Right? And then the tape with black marker said DBZ episodes 119 to 121. So
I know what that is.
Of course. And then you hear Battle Point Unlimited or Battle Power Unlimited. I think it's Battle Point, right?
It is. It's written in katakana. It's Battle Point Unlimited. Yeah.
And that scene, man, and then you meet another kid. Oh well, I've got this, and I think it was 246, 249, Goku versus Boo, and then
That's how it starts. Is everyone's like, I got this. Oh, you're into this? I got this. And so you get this local tape trading circuit going on.
Yes.
And then you make friends with all of them, and then you get a little kind of wider, maybe to a local area. Maybe there's a local club somewhere. Then you get to the internet scene. You're able to do some further trades with people. Then you hear about anime cons.
That's it.
Back when cons, they were still doing illegal stuff in the dealer's room. They clamped down on that. I was buying Sonmei and Ever Anime CDs in 1999. But yeah, that's how it started. It starts real local and it just spreads its way out.
I blew $100 on the Majin Vegeta saga. That's what it was called.
I hear you.
100. Yep. I think it was like they what a ripoff. $20 for 2 episodes. 2, not even 3.
Yeah.
2.
I know.
It's not fair.
I mean, you and I lived through an era where it was that on tape, and then there's the 3, if you're lucky, the 4-episode single disc DVDs. This is definitely one of my get off my lawn things. Like, you have no idea how good you have it.
No, you don't.
Like, even if it is cropped, you have no idea how good you have it.
Can I ask
buying those DVD releases?
Do you miss? Because I don't know if I miss those days, but I have warm feelings.
Right? I hear you. Right? I hear you. It was the thrill of the getting it piecemeal. Like, it was that drug hit that wasn't quite enough, but kept you going. And it's different when you can binge 30 episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I remember when Toonami did the promo for the Second Coming, and and I remember at school, oh man, we're gonna get to see what happens, and I was like, I already know what happens,
right?
Right.
And what's also different about it is when you have those 30 episodes, it's also a bit overwhelming. Even though at the time when we could not watch the whole series, the fact that we knew we could not watch the whole series almost made it less intimidating, because it was, well, I'll get whatever I can get, and that'll be awesome when I get whatever I can get. When you know you can just get everything, it's too easy. Dare I say, it's too easy.
It is. Now, I want to talk to you about this is going to be slightly controversial because you and I, especially you're a different man. I mean, I'm just telling you, I feel the same way you do now than you were back then.
Totally.
Did you go online and did you seek episodes out online? You know what I'm trying to say? Because I talked to you on IRC 10 years ago. You don't remember. 10 years ago, I spoke to you on IRC, and that's why.
What did I say? Was it bad?
No, we're talking about Dragon Ball. It was literally, I remember this. That's how crazy it is. And now here we are. 10 years ago, we talked on IRC. I think it was right when Dragon Boxes were coming out, and there were episodes online, and that's what I was looking for because I wanted them. But even before then, I was just asking if you had looked for episodes online before they came out here. Obviously, the official releases, that's different. But before we had them, like the Boo Saga, for example.
Yes and no. At the point where it was viable to even see those 160 by 120 full episodes, I had already accumulated pretty much everything I wanted on Fansub VHS. Yeah, I mean, I dove in crazy. So by the time you could really watch full episodes, I think I saw some of the Super 5 encodes of the what we would call season 2 era stuff.
Namek?
Yeah, the early Namek stuff that had not yet made its way out. Even in Ultimate Uncut wouldn't be for another like 6 years at that point. But no, I was never really into the full episodes thing. It wasn't relevant to me. I mean, as a curiosity and as I need to know what's going on in the scene. Yeah. Just like I'm aware now of every scanlation that's out there, every fan sub that's out there, I'm aware of it.
Yeah. But
it's not relevant to me and my fandom.
No, I'm the same way. But back then, I mean, you know, when you're a kid, you just have to see it. I had to see the Boo Saga.
I was too crazy, and I had already gotten pretty much everything I wanted to get.
So at that point, you had the entire series fan subbed.
I wouldn't say the entire series, but it was enough. And by that point, 2000 Funimation, that's when Funimation started putting out the bilingual DVDs initially. So it was, and even then with me and Kenshin, I did the same thing. I was like, well, I'm just going to stop getting the fan subs because our glorious corporate overlords have arrived
Yes.
to save us.
Yes, nice and legal. No, I was the same way, but I mean, before Funimation put them out, I had to.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't
crazy.
really into seeking out those episodes. I guess I had enough, and I had enough on my plate. And at that point, I was already running my website, so I'm busy, dog.
Did you also have Dragon Ball? Because Dragon Ball seemed a lot harder to find. You mentioned the
It did.
NGN. That was the Hawaiian subs, right?
Correct. Yeah, it was a Hawaiian TV network, Nippon Golden Network. They subbed the entirety of the original Dragon Ball TV series, and I think episodes 1 through 100, so not quite to the end of the Frieza arc in DBZ. The first early Dragon Ball stuff I got was the 23rd tournament. It was NGN stuff. One episode completely garbled, audio only, didn't matter. It was still the best thing I ever saw.
Yes, it was.
So I was lucky enough. And at that point, I was running my website, so I was starting to make contacts as a 16-year-old. What you think are contacts in the real world, but
networking.
I was networking enough with people of the same ilk to start getting some stuff.
It's funny because that 23rd Budokai, I remember recently I've had people ask me, because people are starting to kind of pick up on these things now. I hate to say it, but I'm kind of their teacher in some ways, and they ask me about Maeda, and I'm like, if you want to see Maeda, bro, you want to see Maeda at his best, I think it's that 23rd Budokai.
Agreed completely.
When Piccolo rips his arm off, dude, I watched it with my fiance recently, and I swear to you, I became 11 years old again because I forgot how violent it was. And I just jumped up like, yo, like it was like you just brings you back a couple times, it does. So let me ask you about your website. So you had obviously expanded it. How did you meet Julian? Because I don't know Julian on a personal level, but every time that I hear Julian or I see him on Twitter, Julian comes off like the most humble human being, cool, laid-back person in history.
He puts up a good front, doesn't he?
All right. Well, you would know.
Oh, Julian's my bud.
Yeah.
Julian, I initially met, for those of you who remember the ancient internet, pre-message boards, pre-chat rooms on Usenet, a news group, alt.fan.dragonball. Julian started posting there. Met a lot of people that are still around to this day. Our good buddy Rachel, who I saw just got married, so congrats to her. She's been around as long as we have. Steve Simmons, who does Funimation's translation.
He got hired.
DBZ, yeah. I mean, fan to real life job. Steve was back around on Alta Fanda Dragon Ball. Wuken, who ran Kanzenshuu, was back there. That's how I got in contact with a lot of those people. I mean, that was the place to go online. There was art.rex.mis.anime was the general anime one, but Dragon Ball had its own specific. I mean, Usenet news groups, they were just message boards, except they were accessible through any ISP. You could get on there. They were kind of this decentralized message board.
So did you tell him, hey, I got this website, come on?
Yes and no. I mean, I was friendly with him for a few years. You mentioned Planet Namek earlier. Julian worked for them for all of like a month as a kid. He was still a kid at that point before Mr. E shut down the site. At that point, Julian was already getting into Japanese classes, and I was looking to transition the site. And I'd already known him a while from the news group. I was like, hey, I'm going to relaunch my site. You in? And he was looking for work, quote unquote work. I mean, he was super into it. So he said, yeah. So
practice.
when we relaunched Daizenshuu EX, it had already been Daizenshuu EX, but it was a big relaunch. I think it was January 2003. That was when I really brought Julian on board. We had been working for about a year at that point toward that big relaunch. That's where he came from.
Yeah, no, he's just such a humble guy. I mean, but like you said, maybe he is putting up a front.
It's true, but at the same time, he's got opinions. He just doesn't share them online as much as we do. He's got 2 kids, so he's got more important things to do.
Yeah, definitely. And he actually did the whole. He went to Japan, moved out there. He pretty much did the dream that like all the anime fans said they were gonna do. He actually did it. So
he did. It's true. Yeah, over there a few times, ended up living there, and only just now came back.
So later on, you fused with and that's what happened. You fused with Kanzentai and made Kanzenshuu.
That's correct, yeah.
I kind of saw that coming. I don't know how. I just knew that at some point you were gonna fuse.
If you were deep into the scene, you saw it coming a mile away. I mean, we basically already were Kanzenshuu for a period of time. And I can tell we registered all those names well in advance of when we actually did it. Heath, who was the main person behind Kanzentai, Him and I became very good friends just naturally over the years. Our missions, our goals were so similar. We were always bouncing ideas off of each other. We had a natural respect for each other's sites, where he never did a music guide because why would he? Because Daizenshuu EX's music guide existed. And he had a lot of specific guides. Like, I just didn't bother doing my Japanese DVD release guide because why would I? He already had all the work done. So we saw how the puzzles were going to fit together. Puzzle pieces, I suppose.
Two
separate puzzles.
It's a match made in the HFIL.
It totally was. Right. Here's a funny story. Jake, who is Herms, one of the 4 guys who works on the site, Jake won one of the earlier contests we did on Daizenshuu EX. It was a contest back around Budokai 3's release, so that would have been 2004, I think. And my contest was to write an original Dragon Universe storyline for a character who was not in the game. And Jake wrote this wonderful submission for Arale. And this was years before I knew Jake. Jake didn't work on Kanzenshuu immediately either. Jake is to Heath as Julian is to me. Heath saw talent in this young upstart and kind of grabbed him and brought him online to work with him. So there's just so many funny connections. My buddy Scott, Kaiser Neko, Team 4-Star, he won a contest on Daizenshuu EX doing replacement Dragon Ball GT cover art.
Now look at him.
I know. You go back. Brady Hartle, who goes by Ashura, who does a lot of promotional merchandising artwork for Bandai Namco. He does all the Tales series artwork and packaging, all that stuff. He works for Discotech. He had an old editorial on DBZ Uncensored. He's been going to my site for 15 years as well.
Yep.
I mean, you trace back all these people. We all started, like you were saying, we had such similar upbringings in such different places, and it's Dragon Ball that brought us all together. And I get like really excited and really nostalgic. You hear my voice crack a little bit. Like, it's so much fun to think of all these different places we came from, and here we all are as over 30 years old, families, houses, jobs.
Yep.
And it's Dragon Ball that brings us together.
And it's crazy because, there's, obviously this is our first time recording together, and you probably had no idea who I was. And there's probably a few people out there who have been following you for a long time, similar backgrounds, similar experiences, I suppose, with the series. And they're there, but they never talk. Like, I never contacted you. And they're there, though. And it's like kind of weird that they're. Who knows who could be watching? Just like the Funimation, you could be watching, or you should be, whatever.
Who could be my friend that I do not know because no one's ever reached out? I know, like, you can hear it again in my voice, like, oh, there's so many cool people out there. Where are you?
There, yeah. Don't be a silent majority, or minority, whatever. Reach out. So
exactly.
Right. Well, the only other questions I have for you before we get out of here is I wanted to ask you a little bit about, again, kind of back in the day. Did you? Because this is just. Wondering, because if it was the same for you too, did you have those PlayStation 1 Dragon Ball games, and did you play them with that Pro Action Replay with the spring and everything?
I sure did. I had the spring that kept it open, Pro Action Replay in the, the parallel port in the back?
The parallel port in the back.
Yeah, you do the swap trick. I think I traditionally used Mortal Kombat Trilogy because it had Redbook audio, so it was the best to load up the most variety of games. So that was my load up the header before I put in my Japanese games.
I was just wondering because it's funny because I literally thought for years I was the only person who did that, and then
no,
geez, man, Final Bout, Ultimate Battle 22, and then Legends, which I think is still a quality game.
I do too. I mean, it did everything decades before what Spike attempted so many years later. I mean, just up to 3-on-3. That the power struggle bar is so different from anything we've ever had. Just doing things in the correct order with the right number of characters to get your percentage up. I mean, it was really ahead of its time, and it didn't have the best sprite work, but it was good enough for what it was doing. I think that's a game was not overlooked back in the day. I think it was a little over-regarded, but I think today is maybe a bit forgotten.
So what's your favorite Dragon Ball game? Do you have one?
Oh, God, don't ask me that. Depending on the day and my mood, it's anything from Super Butoden 2 to Super Dragon Ball Z or Budokai 3.
Not Burst Limit, because I love Burst Limit. But I do agree with what you said, though.
Oh, Burst Limit was such a tough one for me because I purchased a 360 before I purchased a PS3. So I got Burst Limit on 360. And I think it was the week that the game came out. I was a victim of not the red ring of death. I had the thing that Microsoft didn't acknowledge for another year, where the graphics card basically burnt itself alive.
Wow.
So my system totally died, and it was not a free repair. So that kind of was like, I don't even want to play this anymore. So I didn't revisit Burst Limit for years until I picked it up on PS3 again later.
Yeah.
So I never really gave Burst Limit enough of a fair chance. Same with Shin Budokai 2, which Shin Budokai 2 is like the ultimate of that game series, and it's a big. I own it, but it's a big hole in my super knowledge kind of area.
Shin Budokai 2, was that the alternate future one? Was it that
yes,
one?
that was the everything in Trunks' timeline, every character all together somehow,
including the movie characters, which made no
right,
sense.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Whatever. I remember that game. So, what do you think is the future of the franchise? Now, obviously, I'm sure if somebody would have asked you 2 years ago, will we get a new series? You would have been like, of course not. We're gonna
no.
We get movies.
I mean, I figured we would. I knew we would get a movie after Battle of Gods, and I figured maybe we would get one more. And not because a trilogy is the cool thing, but I felt like that would be enough to run its course without overdoing it. And I am concerned that they're gonna overdo it. And this is. I mean, there's so many conversations to be had about Super and Toei as a company and what they're responsible for, what they're able to do, what they should be held accountable for in some respects.
Yeah.
Is Dragon Ball in the right hands? And that's what's so different about these kinds of series in Japan, where once you're with a rights holder, you're basically there for life. Things have changed. Some series have shifted publishers, shifted authors, but Dragon Ball... I mean, Shueisha owns the manga, Toei owns the anime, Bandai owns the games. That's the Japanese way.
Wait,
that is what it is.
So you think that you feel that Dragon Ball should not be Toei's anymore, if in your opinion?
I'm not saying that. I think that Toei is extremely short-sighted. I think they talk a big talk with, oh yes, we look to the global audience and we're aware of how good our international licensing fees are. But if you look at all the moves they make, it doesn't back up what they're saying. And we've got buddies in Japan. I see you talking on Twitter with our buddy Kay quite often.
Oh,
Kay
he's the king of the world.
He has very strong feelings about how Toei and Shueisha treat Dragon Ball, which mirrors exactly how we feel, where it's, why don't you understand just how huge Dragon Ball is as a global phenomenon? Why is it being treated as this, like, close pet? Dragon Ball, and his big thing is Dragon Ball Super isn't even broadcast in every area of Japan simultaneously. There are areas of Japan that are weeks behind, not just a week behind, but weeks behind.
In 2015, man.
In 2015, exactly. It's like the Japanese TV system in particular, but also just Toei as a company. Like, again, they talk the big talk, but they don't walk it.
How long, if somebody were to put a gun to your head, and nobody will do that, but how long do you think Super's going to last? A year, over a year, as popular as it is? I don't know.
I think they want to do at least a year. I think they have grand aspirations of this continuing as long as they possibly can. But as much as I criticize them, I think they're also pretty conservative about it. They probably don't even expect to hit a full year. You go back to Dragon Ball Kai, all of the early advertising and marketing we saw for Dragon Ball Kai, they didn't expect Kai to hit the Cell arc. They probably thought they were going to get to Frieza, and they were lucky if they got to Frieza. And then they said this is doing okay enough, particularly with the international release, that they went into the Cell arc. But even then, that was the kind of, they got chicken about it and stopped, despite how well it was doing internationally. So this is the thing where, like, I can never predict what Toei and Shueisha are going to do, because they never seem to do the logical thing. And they always make it so difficult for themselves. They make it so difficult for their international partners. I mean, look at the situation Funimation's in right now, where it's, we know they've dubbed the Buu arc of Kai.
Yes.
Obviously, Toei is the holdup. If Funimation would already have it on the shelves months, years ago at this point.
Probably on
if
television,
they wanted
right?
to.
I mean, you would think.
Probably,
yeah.
right. obviously Toei's a holdup. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. Toei is the problem there. So they're in a position where it's like, we have this finished product. It's old hat now. Who cares? Dragon Ball Super is the new product. And then even in Japan, you have this thing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Frieza movie isn't even out yet on home video. It's about to be. It's coming out in October.
Yeah.
But we already know it's being retold. So it's like, so which version do I care about? Should I even care? Like, if they're not going to care, why should I care? I think it's a distinct lack of respect for the source material and the audience. And I used that word earlier, accountable. I don't think they should be held accountable in the court of fandom law or anything like that. But I think it's a tough position for them. I don't envy the position they're in owning Dragon Ball, but there needs to be someone with an actual global perspective.
Do you think they underestimate the popularity?
They absolutely 100% do. We got those anecdotes of them being at the Frieza movie premiere over in LA, and they're like, oh, we didn't realize this many people were going to be here. And Sabat's like, you don't understand. These are just like the small amount of tickets we could give out. Have you seen in an American anime convention? Like the number of fans, U.S. alone. And the U.S. was one of the last countries to get the series. Like, the popularity of Dragon Ball in France, in Italy, in Brazil, in Mexico, and of course all the other English-speaking territories as well.
Australia?
I mean, Australia, Canada, of course, which pretty much get around the same time as us. You know, I say North America, I got it last, but, you know, by proxy, they kind of did as well. But, I mean, throughout the entire world, and you go back to, I think Daizenshuu 7, where it was coming out in, 95, 96 at that point, and they had this little global look, oh, here's Dragon Ball in all these other countries. Look how they have the manga, and look how they covered up Goku's penis. Isn't that funny? It's like, it's always this funny curiosity for them, like, oh, other countries actually watch this. Isn't that cute? Yeah, it's cute. Who's paying your bills?
I know, right? They don't get it because, dude, I'll tell you one thing, and I know you know this very well. You know, you might not know this about me, but I am Hispanic, and I have a lot of friends who grew up on Latin American dub. I watched on Telemundo myself. It is so massive, and like you said, Saint Seiya and Dragon Ball are culturally iconic in Latin America, and people are like, "We want the dub, we want Sabbath, and I'm like, "Dude, you don't get it."
And they're like, "No, we want Mario." And when they say Mario, they do not mean Nintendo Mario.
No, Mario Castañeda is how you say it the right way.
That's right.
They want him, but the thing is that the dub fans from this country don't get it. Like, dude, Latin America is even bigger in some cases. I don't know if it's bigger all around, but it's very powerful there, and they don't even have it yet. So what's Toei thinking, right?
Yeah. They don't get it. They get it. They say they get it. They don't get it.
Well, hopefully they'll fix up all the problems that they have, and hopefully we'll get a release soon. I mean, we'll see. I mean, like you said, not even the Kai Buu arc is out. What about that mysterious ocean dub of Kai that's been like lore? You know,
that's another thing. It's like all these extra license holders are just stuck. I don't think anyone knows what to do.
AB Group is probably still waiting.
I mean, you get AB and Toei in the same room, and nothing's ever going to happen.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for being on. Everybody, please go to Kanzenshuu, www.kanzenshuu.com. Mike will not tell you to do this, but I will. Click the PayPal donate button. Drop a couple ducats because you got gimmicks called bills. We can actually say the word bills here when it comes to that.
That's an accurate usage of that word.
Yes, we are
That's
accurately
correct.
using the word bills here. You know, is there anything else you want to say to close out, man? Anything? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I would say that I'm old and I'm from a different era. So you're talking to the actual today's audience. I mean, I can't keep up with a YouTube audience the way that in addition to all the work we do on the website. So I'm so appreciative for anyone with the actual new media audience that points folks towards kind of a relic of fandom past. There's no such thing as fan sites anymore. We're really the anomaly.
Well, I think you're more than a fan site because, and I will say this, you have guides and things of that nature, translation that nobody else has. So it's not that you're just pouring out your love for Dragon Ball.
Exactly.
A lot of people will ask me, they say, okay, like, because I do videos, they'll say, okay, you know a lot about Dragon Ball. Yeah, I do, but I always double check the Kanzenshuu guides, like what manga chapter was this? What episode was this? Who directed this? I know it because of Kanzenshuu. So it's like, that people need to go to Kanzenshuu and double check everything. And I honestly feel, and I'm not going to get into the misinformation of the community because that's a whole other thing, but I feel like if more people took the time to at least check Kanzenshuu and double check their sources and their facts, I think there would be less misinformation. But at this point, I don't know if that's ever going to go away.
I mean, that's just fandom. You get into something and you think you learn something, but you don't know. And just to kind of quote movie 13, I'm going to be that dude. If I don't do it, who will? It's one of those things where we have the ability, we have the technology, to kind of quote that appropriately. You know, we have all this stuff at our disposal. And to be frank, we know what we're doing. So we're going to use what we have at our disposal to do something good. And to us, something good is documenting this stuff because no one else is doing it. The reason we have everything we have is because we wanted it and no one else had done it. No one else is archiving Toriyama's weekly comments. I mean, it was done in Japanese. It didn't exist in English. It really didn't exist in any other language. So not just that stuff, but I mean, we recently put up Toriyama's 2 earliest, and when I say earliest, I mean his actual first public interviews ever.
Like pre-Dragon Ball, like Dr. Slump.
Pre-Dragon Ball. We're talking Dr. Slump was still new. Yeah. This is the kind of stuff that is so interesting to us and will be lost if someone doesn't take the initiative. And that, you know, kind of hypes up ourselves too much, like, oh, we're so great because we're the ones doing it. But yeah, we are, because no one else is doing it. And this stuff will be lost to time. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where it's, if you want to get a true understanding of Dragon Ball, you gotta go above and beyond. You have to look at everything that went into it, the people who made it. Dragon Ball is a product, but it's a product of people. It's an artistic creation. It's not just
Toriyama, Koyama, Yamamuro, the whole group is what you're saying.
Right. They all have something to say. They all have something interesting to say. Even when it's Koyama talking BS about Broly and his own internal Broly Wankfest, there's something interesting there. And that shapes how you then go back and look at those movies. And it gives you a greater understanding of that's why he drew that the way he did. That's how this product came to be. Oh, that places that in history for me in comparison to this. And when I look at this, that's why, for example, another great example I talk about recently is the reason we have Vegito in the manga as a fusion of the Potara earrings is because Gogeta had already been made for DBZ Movie 12. And Toriyama said, well, I don't want to just do the same thing. So then he's got his BFF that he's talking to, the author of DNA Squared, whose name I'm totally blanking on at the moment.
The guy who said, hey, you should combine characters, is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. So, oh my God, I feel awful for not remembering
his name too, man. Jeez, I had his name And then he even made a comment like, oh, well, at least you're good for something or whatever, right? Like, I remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
You read these things like, oh, that's why it is the way it is. And we get, again, all that background information about why Cell became the villain. I mean, there's so many good stories there that let you appreciate it from an internal story perspective, but an external story perspective. I said it's a piece of artistic creation. I stand by that. Dragon Ball is a piece of art, but it's also this piece of consumerism. It really is. I mean, it was made for a specific audience. It was made to pander to that audience. And when you look at it from that perspective, you get an even better, different understanding of how it came to be. And we want to be that resource that gives you, and we'll attack it from all of those angles for you, so you can read. I mean, we're talking just about interview translations, and that's in addition to all the other stuff we have on the website. We have so much stuff. We've been doing this for so long. You can waste days, just like you can waste days on TV tropes or Wikipedia. Please instead waste your days on Kanzenshuu. We appreciate that.
Click that donate button. So here's the thing. Last question about everything you just said.
Sure.
You've got the podcast, you've got the guides, you've got the translations, you've got the song lyrics even. What is the thing that you are most proud of on Kanzenshuu? If there is one thing.
I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I would be really cliche about it and just say the friendships, because it's this cool thing that we've made, but I've met so many awesome people along the way. Not to compare myself to Goku, but I've met rivals that I've turned into friends. I've gotten married because of the series, in a way, I suppose. Dragon Ball has brought so much joy to my life. That's what I'm most proud of and thankful for.
Nothing can top what you just said. Okay, well, thanks everybody for checking it out. Check out Kanzenshuu, like I said, and hey, I'll catch y'all down the road.